What I saw, I don't know, but at some point, we'll come back.
Well, no, yes.
If I leave you back where we're at. Very, where I'm at in our system is about this one.
We don't know how to pack them in, though.
Riveting stuff.
We offer popcorn.
Hot dogs. Montreal.
Man, did you do a presentation tonight, too?
Back on this.
Hey, Charlie, welcome back. Good to be back. What's down there? Beautiful down there.
Consider 90-degree roof.
A little too warm. I think about the bewitching hour, right? Okay, thanks, Karen. Let's see. All right, well, welcome to the Thursday, April 28th Webster Town Board Workshop. Tonight we have three agenda items. The first one, actually it says a presentation by Highway Superintendent Pat Stevens on townwide drainage. But Pat, I think you have some assistance on this presentation, correct?
Yeah, I've definitely brought some backup, some additional people that are heavily involved in that effort, that program tonight. So,
Time's with you.
ready to go? Okay, so we're here tonight to talk about the establishment of a townwide drainage district. That would be a drainage district across the entirety of the town instead of a large portion of it that we currently have. So this is something that my predecessor, Joe Herbst, had worked on for a few years and felt was needed. As I have been here only about a year, I certainly see why his dedication was to that. When I look at what we were able to do in our stormwater maintenance program, which deals with all of the common drainage ways and stormwater treatment facilities in town. So we put some information together for everyone to look at and review on some of the key points of that. Mary, in a second, is going to talk about compliance with our MS4 program. We, as a town, are an MS4 and have a lot of compliance regulations that we have to complete per the requirements of the program. So it's a heavy lift, much greater than when drainage districts started to be established. It's increased a lot over the years, especially around 2000, when some of these regulations got formalized and passed on to the towns to carry them on with really no financial support. So that's a key factor. I also have my foreman, Joe Merrick, who's here with me tonight to talk about the actual operation that we do, where you see us out in the community working on these drainage ways, be it roadways, swales, ditches, or sometimes streams, depending on what's going on. So he's going to touch on that as we go through this. But we're going to start with Mary's portion on the MS4 program. I'll turn it over to her.
Yes, so I'm going to outline kind of the basics of the MS4 program. So MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. The town is its own MS4. The village is its own MS4, so we regulate within our own boundaries. We don't regulate the village. They enforce this program themselves. So MS4s are required to develop a stormwater management program that will reduce the amount of pollutants carried by stormwater during storm events to water bodies to the maximum extent practicable. The goal of the program is to improve waterway quality and recreational use of waterways. So the entire town is bound by the requirements of this program. I think that's really important to consider when we are looking at a town-wide drainage district. It's not just the subdivisions that come online in town that has to be compliant with this program. It's every portion of the town. So to help us comply with this program, the Stormwater Coalition of Monroe County was established in 2000, and Webster is a partner of this program. There's 29 municipal members, and it supports the town's efforts to execute the program, and it assists us with an annual report that's required by the DEC, training our staff, and then additional reporting that's due throughout the year. There are 6, they call them minimum control measures, so that's what MCM stands for in all these items that are a part of this program. So it's public education, public participation, illicit discharge, construction stormwater management, post-construction stormwater management, and municipal pollution prevention. So I'm going to go over all of these items. So the first one, public education. The coalition and the town are tasked with developing a program to educate residents and businesses. We have to make educational documents publicly available. So at the, I know at the rec center and the town hall, there's little pamphlets that we get from the Monroe County Stormwater Coalition that are available to the public. They encourage us to present at school and community events, and I know that the county also does a lot of that on behalf of the town and the other communities. Promote the H2O Hero campaign. I think hopefully everyone's seen this guy out on the billboards around the community. And then post signage in parks and near stormwater features. So over in between town hall and the courthouse, there's a rain garden, which is a stormwater feature, and there's a sign posted there that explains how that works. And I think there's some signage in the parks about picking up after your pets, as that's a big pollutant in stormwater and other things of that nature. The second, public participation. So the town is asked to present the annual report to the town board each year. So that will be at our next workshop. I will be talking more about the MS4. And then we also host a hazardous waste collection at the highway department, and we encourage our residents to utilize the Eco Park, which is a Monroe County facility. We have storm drain marking across the town. I don't know if you've ever walked through your neighborhood and seen that sturgeon that's located by your catch basin to remind you that whatever goes down the drains doesn't get treated and goes eventually to our water bodies. And then the county also promotes the use of rain barrel barrel construction, and I know they used to do demonstrations and show people how to make them. I don't know what COVID's done with that training, but hopefully it comes back if they've temporarily suspended it. So I would say the first two measures are heavily helped by the coalition. Each municipality pays into that program annually, so they have a bigger pot of money to deal with the public outreach and campaigns and things of that nature. So we're getting to parts of the program that the town is more heavily involved in. So the illicit discharge program is, the town is tasked with discovering and eliminating illicit discharges. So this is cross connections with the sanitary sewer going into the stormwater. If there's dumpsters that are leaking next to our catch basins and there's no treatment there. If there's painters that are just spraying off brushes and letting it go into the storm sewer. I actually witnessed a pet grooming, a mobile pet grooming vehicle just open up their soapy water in a parking lot once and just let all of the suds and soapy water go right into the catch basin. Not in Webster, but in a town before that I was living in, and it just let it go down the drain. So I'm guessing they did that somewhat regularly. So that's something that we wouldn't allow. So we're supposed to inspect all of our outfalls, so that's any opening where a piped discharge is going out into a surface water once every 5 years, and right now the town of Webster has about 600 mapped outfalls. So that's over 100 that we're supposed to be inspecting every year, and we work on that. We were doing paper copy inspections. Last year we got trained by the county. They lent us a tablet to fill out an inspection and take photos mobily, so that was a handy tool that they were able to assist us with, and I think we'll continue using that this summer. We also train and educate our staff and public, and then maintain records of these inspections. We have them mapped in our GIS system, and keep record of any detections of discharges that were illicit and how we remediated them. The next measure is construction stormwater management. So this is the development in town, and Webster has arguably more development going on than some of the other towns in the county. So this is a little bit bigger effort on our part than some of the other members of the coalition. So we train staff on the permit requirements, erosion and sediment control, and the design standards that need to be implemented. We review the stormwater design and the construction controls when it's going through the permitting and plan process with the town. We permit the activity as the MS4. We grant the permit to the operator of the site. And then we review, they're called SWIP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plans. They do inspections either weekly or bi-weekly on these construction sites. So the town gets sent the inspections and we have to review them for compliance. And then we also have to perform our own construction site inspections and then enforce the violations, which that alone can be a time-consuming effort. It's typically not a priority of a contractor to have all these measures in place and keep up with them. And I personally took all the photos on this slide, so there's definitely some room for improvement in our town, and we're working to get our contractors on board with this. The fifth measure, this is a lot of what Pat's going to be talking about with what Highway works on. So they train their staff on the permit, erosion control, and design standards for the stormwater infrastructure that's put in most of the time by developers and then turned over to the town. So we have to inspect and maintain municipal stormwater infrastructure and facilities. So that's our stormwater ponds, drainage ways, piping, catch basins, streams, and other things that they'll discuss later. And another portion of this is that something that my department handles is coordinating the review and enforcement of commercial and privately owned stormwater inspections. So any of our commercial or private partners in town that have put in their own stormwater facility and it's maintained by themselves, we require that a licensed engineer perform an inspection every year, so we are doing that outreach right now to make sure that we get all those reports into the town and then follow up with any issues that were discovered during that. And then the sixth measure is a municipal pollution prevention program. So it's up to the town to develop and implement a pollution prevention and good housekeeping program for the municipal operations and facilities. So specifically for the town, that would be the highway department and the parks department where they have their facility. And then make sure that they're training their staff on these best practices and perform self-assessments to make sure that it's being followed through. I also want to mention, I know when Joe Herbst was here last year, there was a draft permit that was forthcoming, and it has been published. There are a lot of things that would increase the effort of the municipality. So a couple of the major items that are in that draft permit, which is currently being reviewed in Albany. There's a lot of municipalities that are finding that the requirements of the program would just add too much of a workload and cost. So they're working through what the final permit will be, but I'm sure at the end of the day it will be more work than what is currently required of the town. So we'll have to perform catch basin inspections, so we'll have to inspect, document, and keep records on every single catch basin in town. And we have to inspect all of them at least once every 5 years, and there's approximately 4,500 in the town. And so currently, I guess Pat would speak better to this, but I think that, do you do regular inspections or just as maintenance concerns arise?
You know, we do inspections, but a lot of times they are tied to the other maintenance, to the road maintenance that we're doing. We obviously focus a lot of them in areas that we're going to do work or have upcoming work, or that we're seeing a lot of problems. That's you know, a big part of this is that our maintenance programs that we're able to implement right now, based on the budget and the funding that's available, need to be increased. You know, that's the big driver behind all of this. And so inspections is generally
The closest we come to a routine one would be every 8 years. The roads are targeted to be oil and snow every 8 years, and prior to doing that, we do a catch basin inspection. All the roads are oil and snow. Every 8 years, we inspect the catch basins on the roads that we're going to surface treat. So right now, it's on an 8-year rotation, not 5.
And the documentation of those inspections would be more robust and time-consuming on the town's behalf if and when this gets added to the permit. There would be increased construction inspection frequency by municipalities. Right now, municipality only has to perform their own SWIP inspections at a certain frequency, and it would be increased quite dramatically with this new permit. We'd have to develop a formal stormwater pollution protection plan for our municipal operations and then perform those inspections more frequently. There would be additional staff training required of our highway, parks, and engineering staff, additional mapping requirements and tracking in our GIS system, additional development of processes and procedures and record keeping for different aspects of the program, and then additional public involvement and education. There would be more responsibility on the individual MS4 to do the public outreach and education versus leaning heavily on the coalition like we do right now. And then my last slide here is just an example of some estimated costs based on these upcoming changes of the MS4 program. So to do the inspections of the catch basins, which is approximately $900 a year, I would estimate that being a $15,000 to $20,000 labor cost to do that. The increased construction inspection frequency, so that's going out to the sites, that's taking photos, writing up the inspection, showing where the disturbances and the practices are being implemented on site. That increase would probably be about $12,000 a year in labor for staff. if we had to hire an engineer to develop SWIPs for our municipal operations, and it would probably be $10,000 to $15,000 a site, plus an annual $2,500 to inspect it if it wasn't self-performed by the town. And then additional staff training. With the number of staff that touch this program, I estimated at about $6,000 a year. And then just keep making our mapping more robust and tracking more things in our GIS, implementing more, adding more data such as invert elevations and size of catch basins and things of that nature. Just putting an investment of $2,000 to $5,000 a year on making that more robust, which could be even higher depending on how much staff and time we have to dedicate towards that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mary, for that portion. I'm going to take over this next section. So, you know, that last page there is one that starts to speak to the financial portion of this, which obviously establishing the drainage district will generate more funds for those. But right now, the funds that are generated by the large portion of drainage district that we do have established in town are primarily focused at the actual maintenance of physically of the drainage ways that you know, keep our roads from flooding, keep you know, the mass area of drainage functioning properly. Right now, all of those funds are directed at that effort, and we're still falling behind. You know, these programs, our maintenance cycles are much longer than we want them to be. The amount of infrastructure that has been taken on in the development of Webster over the last 40 years since they started putting these in is larger than the current fee and district can support. So the initial establishment of a town-wide drainage district would allow us to improve those efforts. And then beyond that, we need to continue to plan for a lot of what Mary went over. You know, that last page there, that's a very, very new development. As I said, the initial implementation of the MS4 program on towns was back in 2000 when a lot of regulations came up. Now it's going to be increased even more. So there's additional planning that needs to continue to be done on this topic, but the establishment of the townwide drainage district really is the first step. So with that, the section I have here is, you know, the purpose of a drainage district is really to fund the MS4 requirements of the MCM 5 portion, which is the portion that we, like I just said, is most of our funds are targeted at right now. They're the post-construction stormwater management that are imposed by the federal government, EPA, and New York State DEC. The execution within that is to maintain common waterways and infrastructure. That's roadside swales, catch basins, basically anything that conveys water to our receiving waters, which in our case is Lake Ontario. So those are the things that we're doing. Reviewing maintenance of commercial treatment facilities, which Mary touched on, reviewing new development plans in conformance with state standards. Staying strong on those efforts there, reviewing new commercial development, making sure we're bringing on our contractors, our developers in town as partners in this is a huge part of this. We've unfortunately seen a great deal of infrastructure that hasn't had the life expectancy that it should, or is needing maintenance sooner than it should. You know, that is compounding this issue in a big way. It's an effort that, you know, Mary and I and Joe and everybody in the department is really trying to focus on this year, working with developers to bring these requirements to the forefront of their mind and try to be preventative about eliminating more of this infrastructure, needing more time, money, and maintenance than is needed. In the first 5 years or so, the inspection results of these facilities that we take dedication of in our neighborhoods should need very minimal maintenance, very basic preventative maintenance, mowing, things of that nature. Anything beyond that is really unacceptable in a lot of ways. So we're working very hard on that front to improve those areas. And then we obviously have annual reporting with our facilities, documentation of the drainage facilities. I mentioned up above that one of the execution portions is to maintain common waterways. So That's sometimes a term that's difficult to grasp, so down at the bottom I have that a common drainage way is one that receives runoff from multiple residents and is under town easement or under jurisdiction of other agencies. So some of our drainage ways that are streams or creeks are under the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers or the New York State DEC. Those, we actually have to get permits to go in and do a lot of alternation other than basic maintenance, like taking trees out of them and things of that nature. So it has to be in one of those things. So just because you're in a drainage district, if there isn't an easement over a portion of your property, and it doesn't contribute to anyone other than yourself, then that's not what these funds are for. You know, if there's a swale or a catch basin or a drainage that you know, maybe 5 or 10 or 20 houses all utilize, those are the types of infrastructure that our program maintains, not your private property, essentially. So I just wanted to clarify that. This next image is a map. This map shows the 5 major watersheds that we currently have in town, and the red portion represents the parcels that are currently in a drainage district. So as you can see, a large portion of the town is already in a drainage district. The other important thing to remember with this is there are not portions of town that aren't in a watershed. So what that means is there are no parcels in town that don't benefit from a drainage district in some way. Even if you don't have a piece of infrastructure in your yard or a swale, the fact that you can drive down your roads or that in big rainstorms your area isn't flooded is because the common drainage ways in the area are maintained and functioning properly. So it might be great if you're way up on a hill and you'd never see water in a storm event, but you probably wouldn't be able to get from your house anywhere using the roads if the drainage district funds weren't maintaining them. So that's a important thing to remember. A lot of the larger portions on here actually that don't look like they're within a drainage district. Some of them are large parks, common land, things of that nature, not residential areas. There's a lot in there. So that's what this map is showing. The major watersheds are 4 Mile Creek, Mill Creek, there's a Webster watershed, Shipbuilders Creek, and Irondequoit Creek on the west side of town. So all of those collect and drain to the lake. Each one of those areas, therefore everybody in them needs the waterways to be maintained to make sure that they continue to drain to the lake and don't back up, flood, and cause damage to property. So that's what this map here shows. Next one. So our current drainage districts, I just touched on a little bit, but they originally began being established in the 80s to support the maintenance and reporting efforts by the town, which at that time were significantly less. Some Mary's presentation on what's currently required and what is going to be required very soon. None of those things were really in place when the concept of the drainage district started to be implemented. It was purely to keep streams and waterways, like you see on the right of this image, free of trees, like you see looming over there, which is becoming more and more common. It's one of our most common calls, and it can really back up flow if you're not careful. But currently, approximately 78% of town residents are in a drainage district. And essentially, the 22% of residents that are not currently in a drainage district have been receiving the benefits of the maintenance, but have not contributed to the cost. So the concept that I just mentioned on the map that everybody's property, when it rains, rain lands on your property, it doesn't go straight into the ground. It collects in some way, even if it's a minor form, eventually gets to a stream or conveyance of some kind and flows to the lake. Those have been being maintained throughout town, regardless if you're in a district or not, throughout time. So then you have commercial properties. The majority of our commercial properties are required to maintain their own individual stormwater facilities. So these are the ponds, forebays, things of that nature. But they still discharge into these common drainage ways, so they also need to contribute to drainage districts in their own way, which is a little bit different than a residence, but they're still utilizing those waterways for their flow from their facilities. And then on that topic, current drainage districts. Joe manages our current efforts on that front, the different things we do at houses. He runs the day-to-day of all of the requests, concerns, complaints that come in. So I was going to have him talk a little bit about just what we do on a day-to-day when you see us out there, what we've got going on, and then the level of effort, or not effort, but the amount of issues we're able to address in a year, in a season, which is an issue. So expand on that a little bit.
Some of the things we respond to, that I already mentioned, the trees down in creeks, that's been popular the last few years. We also do maintenance work on the ponds. Some of the older ones need to be desilted, tree removal around them. We try to stay on top of the newer ones, basically maintain them with mowing efforts. Some of the bigger swales in town, same thing, mowing maintenance. Some of them need improvements, so we'll target a few of them over the years, swales and things, to make improvements if we've experienced flooding, increase the size of culverts. And we're finding some of the aging subdivisions, the 40-year-old ones, steel pipes are rotting out and they're starting to need replacement. So that's a bigger problem that we're seeing now. That's about it.
Yeah, those are the major things that, you know, Joe's taking calls on a daily basis, and yeah, some of that infrastructure is reaching its life expectancy, and we're seeing additional or more larger areas that we're going to have to attack, in addition to wanting to increase the frequency of all of those activities that he just mentioned, the mowing and the clearing. At times now, we get calls, and if it's not a severe thing that's actually blocking water, it can take an entire year or more before we could get there to deal with the situation, and we'd like to be more preventative than that. So we're talking about the establishment of townwide drainage districts, so I wanted to just go into a couple of the impacts and opportunities for the residents that go along with this. First and foremost, the townwide drainage district currently, the way it is paid for is an annual fee on your tax bill. In 2021, that fee was $42 per household, or per tax bill, which is just a flat fee for each individual tax bill. And again, 78% of our residents paid that in 2021, or were billed it. I can't speak to exactly what was paid, but they were billed it. So that is what the people that would be incorporated in the townwide that currently aren't would be looking at as an impact. Opportunities that are available, however, as being inside a drainage district, is if there are areas that could be enhanced or improved for drainage that benefit multiple residents, a plan can be made, easements can be established, and once the initial improvement, if needed, is made to the area, the town would take dedication via easement and maintain that in the future. So if there's areas that are issues, we can plan accordingly to improve them and then be able to maintain them long-term, which would take it off of an individual's plate, as long as that particular feature benefits more than just one individual. The incorporation of the remaining 22% of residents into the townwide drainage district will also allow our maintenance cycles to be shortened, which will provide more timely response to the issues that are identified and called in on a regular basis by our residents. If there are existing drainageways in your area that have conditions impacting flow, the additional dollars generated by incorporating the remaining 22% of the residents into a townwide drainage district would help us be able to address those issues as well. So that's existing streams, existing swales, different things that have trees in them. This would go to fund a more timely response to that as well. So the first one is more of a development of new features or adjustment of features, addition of pipe, catch basins, things that may drain the area better. The second one is being able to expand the areas we're impacting with our current maintenance efforts. So the next steps to establishing the townwide drainage district for the board to consider would be to begin the district creation process. So so that a board resolution can be presented and voted on prior to September. That's the deadline for getting the fee onto the tax bill for 2023. So in order to implement this, that would be the process. And then the next steps beyond that, once that process is done and established, would be to improve the maintenance compliance by planning for our MS4 program in 2023. So that's the end for me, unless there are questions, comments.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you foresee getting individual additional easements, or is your expectation that the process of getting it, or having a townwide district will do away with the need for getting further easements?
So no, I would still get further easements. Once we have an easement, there's a certain list of things we maintain within it, primarily in a drainage district, the flow of drainage. So we would still do mowing, clearing of trees, anything that impacted the drainage feature within the easement. To open that up to all portions of the property, not need easement anymore, I think would be not the goal of this. It would be too broad of a stroke. I think it would encumber some of the properties in ways where it would give us jurisdiction to go in and do things beyond maybe what would be a resident, so it might have a negative impact on the resident. And then secondly, we really do want to define these areas and make sure that we can put them on a preventative maintenance program long-term. That would be the reason to establish individual easements for any features we were taking over.
So that's going to require going to each individual property owner and obtaining an easement.
Correct.
And if they don't want to do that, then we would have to condemn. Correct?
So, in general, yes. So if there was a condition on private property currently that was negatively impacting multiple residents, we could implement that process to do it. Primarily, most of the things I see are areas that are currently wet or not draining well, where the residents would actually want to improve the drainage. I can't really, it would have to be a pretty extreme situation for us to go through the condemnation process.
We had to do that, as you know,
Yeah,
a few years back,
yeah, but that's, I think, kind of a unique condition. I wouldn't want to set up the district based on a more rare situation that we may see here and there. I just don't see that being a common occurrence where we have to do that, where there'd be a privately owned
Well,
piece of property.
it would be nice not to, but what
Yeah.
I'm saying is obviously you can't control, you have 22% of the homeowners, which is 9,000 plus,
Sure,
that even a small percentage of that could hold up the entire process.
yeah, that is an issue to overcome. I wouldn't want this to be the key to unlocking that. There still has to be a certain amount of collaboration in order to do improvements. I can't think of any instances right now necessarily areas or programs that we would like to go in and implement features where we can't. Like I said, primarily with these drainage type of things, individuals want to improve it. And I don't know that there's a particular way, or this is the right way to solve the issue of a single individual holding back improvements for a large group. I think that still needs to be handled on an individual basis.
What I'm trying to understand is the imposition of a town-wide district would basically give the town the opportunity to create one large district as opposed to all these separate extensions to
Yes,
subdivision districts that we have now.
correct.
So everything would sort of be merged or incorporated into the town-wide district. I understand that, and I understand the concept. My only concern is going in and getting easements, which again is an ideal. We want to have the specific authority and right to go in. However, you do need under due process to obtain that right. And
Yeah,
if people are not going to do it voluntarily, and not everybody's going to agree that it is in their best interest,
right.
then we're going to have problems. So.
As we do now. So currently, you know, the drainage districts that are established in various areas, we still maintain the things that are under easement, and we have a limited ability in most cases to change things that are not under easement, even in the current districts. I'm not proposing to change that.
No, I think for emergency purposes, you can go in now. That's not the issue. I think the issue is, what you're talking about is something more, I'll say routine.
Yeah.
Which is a good idea. You want to forestall problems and not just react to emergencies.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of, again, the legal administrative process of getting this going.
Sure.
Guy, you said, I'm sorry, I don't know.
No, I love it. Keep going. No, Charlie, keep going.
The question about, you had mentioned that you want to get it done by, or get the district formed by this fall. Early fall.
Yes. Yeah, we're April now, so there's some time, it is a process to go through, but the goal would be to get that process started with the goal of having it ready in September. If something happened, there was issues and whatnot, at least we would be that much farther along in the process.
Is this dependent on any grants or anything like that that we need at this point? I mean, is there a reason why that date is, I mean, that's just a date you put in, sort of?
No, that date is tied to the tax roll and the assessor's role in actually getting the fee onto the roll for
So
2023.
there's a purpose for that date?
Yeah, the date is tied to the ability to be able to generate those funds for the 2023 season and get the benefits, the improvements to the program started next year would be tied to the September date.
You know, it's funny, if you go back one screen, I love the fact, Charlie, that you started off the questions and your brain is thinking now, right? What looks like an innocent bullet point of begin the district creation process so that the board resolution can be done, presented, and voted on prior to September. Seems like a simple enough statement. Between May and September, Charlie, I think you're gonna probably have a lot of research or work to do, maybe, because I really don't know at this point, what is the process from May 1st to September 1st, which is, I think, a 4-month period, legally, to do this. I know what probably the end of the process is some type of resolution, establishment of the district, local law. I have no idea how we get from where we're at now to that, and that's gonna fall right in your lap.
Well, yeah, and I sort of gave a very, very brief and short heads up to our finance director who's here tonight. It's, I think I would have to discuss, he and I would have to discuss how we're going to do this. The funding is going to be a big issue depending on how it's funded. The town obviously has more leeway if we don't have to borrow, if we don't have to expend any further monies to do it. Anyway, that's something, I mean, it's not anything you have to decide tonight, but there are some.
Yeah, that's,
that have to be looked at.
I can't envision, but I've said I don't know what I don't know, that there is any expenditure monies to set up this district, but that through the research, that might not be the case.
That would be a good thing.
Yeah.
We still have to do filings with the state, however.
Sure.
So-
You know what's interesting, and I give the example that happened in the last year to show you that, I guess it kind of highlights the inequity of one house having $42 on their tax bill as a drainage district charge on their town tax bill, and another house, the 22% right now that don't have it, 22% of the residential units. We had a situation that Mr. Maripes was very involved in, so were you, Charlie, setting up the easement of 3 houses on a road that had a real drainage problem in their backyard. I'll give the Reader's Digest to this. The houses, there were 3 right in a row. The bookend houses must have been built since 1980 or whatever, so on their tax bill, they have $42. The house in the middle was pre-1980 and therefore was grandfathered in when these things started and doesn't currently. It's one of those 22% that doesn't have a $42 charge in their bill. Does that make any sense?
Does it from a service point, or what you benefit, no.
Yeah, and that's where, the way I understand it, and it's funny because 14 months ago, almost to the day, it was a parting gift to Joe Herbst, that, hey, Joe, you know, I know that this is gonna be in your bonnet about a townwide drainage district and the MS4s and all the things that you've already seen. So I said, you know what, Joe, come in and do a presentation at the town board workshop. And he did on February 25th, 2021, and the next day was his last day. And a lot of what he presented, which was memos and letters to the board, it almost is 90% exact to what Pat and Mary and Joe presented tonight, more in PowerPoint. So it's interesting because if you go back to the tape of that meeting, I think the town board at that time, you know, I just remember them saying, wow, you know, when you look at the fact, if I remember correctly, that when drainage districts started in the 80s, and I'd have to go back and tell you whatever, but the existing developments, existing homes were grandfathered in to not be in a drainage district, to not have that charge on their tax bill. And then as development happened in Webster through the 80s and 90s and whatever, you know, these districts, all new developments are in districts, correct? Since this was rolled out in the 80s?
Yeah, so it's one consolidated district, but it's extended as the
Right.
developments happen.
Exactly, okay, which might help with, this is just, the
Right.
consolidated district just gets expanded to the grandfathered in houses of 22% from 40, 50 years ago, which hopefully, Charlie, will end up being a very easy legal path, but that remains to be seen. So, you know, I mean, by 1990, I'm guessing that with houses being built, that it might have been the exact opposite, that 22% of the residences in town in 1990 were in a drainage district, but 78% were old Webster, still grandfathered in from back in the day. I don't think I need to tell anybody that basically over the last 40 years, the town has grown a lot, there's been a lot of houses built, and somewhere along the lines, as we went from 5,000 residences to 10,000 residences to about 15,000 now, the grandfathered ones remain static, about 3,000. So now, with 15,000 residential units in town, the ones who don't pay into a district are 22%. And it does beg the question, and it begs the question that we asked here 14 months ago when Joe Herbst came in, is that fair?
And I have a question for you. Right?
Yeah, because I'm going to leave that question just hanging out in the air, is that fair? And hand the baton to you, John.
So, with the addition of the 22% of the residents not currently paying, is that going to cover all your costs for manpower? We need additional manpower, do you think?
We certainly do, you know, that's
Yeah.
across the board. You know, in this area, as I said, the maintenance cycles that we're currently having need to be improved. That would be a great start. It would go a long way to improving that program. The way we would handle that is to take the additional funds, implement them into the program, run the program, see where that brought us for cycles, see how the actual time taken results, and then reassess once that's in there. But it's very, very clear right now that we could have a lot of improvement and still probably not be in an ideal situation to really minimize that cost, because the more preventative maintenance we can do versus damage control will actually drive the overall cost of the program down, because you're maintaining, not replacing.
And that's at the $42 fee, correct?
Correct, yeah, we wouldn't propose to change the fee at this time. Again, we would implement the townwide, take those additional funds by incorporating the 22%, and then reassess the overall budget annually, I would say, to make any further adjustments, but it'd be a great start. It'll get us in a much better place.
Thanks, Pat. Mary, thanks.
And I will say that I got to take responsibility for this having gone over time, but as the day progressed yesterday, today, and we saw just how much meat was on the bone to properly present this. it was pretty obvious that 15 minutes was not going to do it justice. So I apologize to Paul and to the chief who are here for time slots that now are half an hour past. But Jenny, Patty, Bill, any other questions or comments on this?
Not at this time.
No, I don't have anything. I'm sure we'll be having more discussions. As you said, it is something that we've been looking at since Joe Herbst left it with us back in February of '21, and we'll continue to explore it, see where it's going. And I would agree with you, is it fair?
Yeah, and because, Mary, was this another one that right up until about 15 minutes ago, you were doing your magic on bringing pictures in, editing words and all that on this 20-page PowerPoint?
Yeah, someone caught that the printouts were warm when I handed them out, so guilty as charged.
And I'm in this, well, and you know, the guilty as charged is, and mea culpa, we are trying to move in a direction where the department heads come in and give these type of presentations, PowerPoints, colorful, graphic, if you want to call it, less verbiage, because at the end of the day, we want those to go out on our town website, we want them to go out on our social media sites, and almost tell the story to the citizens for us. And the reality is, and I don't know if this makes me cynical, and I love Joe Herbst, when he presented to us 14 months ago, he gave us 7 pages of text and verbiage. And it's all lockstep with that. My cynicism is that if we put this up on the website and social media, that the attention of citizens today in society, they're not going to read that. But we're betting that they will read that, and they'll absorb that, and they will, to us, that's a better communication mechanism between town government and the citizens. The problem is that because we're editing some of these things in the infancy stage of this, right up to a half an hour before, I'm still challenged with this on getting them up 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever, before the actual meeting. My good friend, Charlie Genesi, has said, keep working toward it. The law on that gives a lot of flexibility. Do you remember saying that to me?
Sure.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so is that the end of this segment?
Thanks.
Thank you, gang. All right, Chief.
Let me use the chair for a second.
Actually, I did have 30 minutes slotted for this, so it's not overtime as much as I thought. Good.
Good night, Jeff. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, gang.
Bye-bye.
So Chief, the next item up is a presentation by Chief Dennis Kohlmeyer on a proposed event schedule augmentation. I don't know how you really want to describe it.
Yeah, so the basic discussion is regarding public events and the permitting process. Part of that discussion involves the fees associated with it. So before I get to the PowerPoint itself, I just wanted to kind of recap our current permitting process and how we approach public events. There's a flat $50 processing fee for any type of public event. But then there's an additional fee based on the size of the event, the projected attendance. So as the screen here is enhanced, I think give me a second here. This section down here on the screen is what I'm referring to, where the size of the event incurs additional cost for the person hosting the event. One of the concerns that I wanted to bring to discussion is that approach doesn't necessarily reflect the resources that are required for a public event. If I put it in the context of, if I'm going to schedule a marathon that covers 26.2 miles and only have 50 people run, it's still a large number of resources as if I had 400, 500, 1,000, 5,000 people run. So it doesn't necessarily reflect the resources that are allocated to an event. It just kind of approaches it from a recognition that larger events may require additional resources. So I just wanted to kind of cover that prior to getting into the PowerPoint. In reference to the PowerPoint, I took it to heart when you said a few slides with few words. There's only 3 slides, so there's not a lot of verbiage. So before we got into discussion on how the town would like to approach addressing the charges or fees that are associated with public events, I wanted to put it in context of how other towns are approaching it in Monroe County. So I did a survey of the other police departments in Monroe County and how they approach events. So as the graphic here identifies, every other town, including the sheriff's department, who covers the towns that don't have their own police department, do charge for law enforcement resources that are assigned to events. There is some variation, though, on the type of organizations and events that they have fees for. The basic concepts are that there's differentiation between the types of organizations or the types of events. So you have local government entities. Those could be fire departments, they could be school districts, they could be towns and villages from the sheriff's department's point of view, where they wouldn't charge for providing services to those groups. There's private businesses. Those would be for-profit organizations that are conducting events that would potentially require resources to assist them with the safety perspectives that associate with those. And then there's non-for-profit designated agencies that may be doing it as fundraisers or part of community service events or other types of gatherings. And then another point of differentiation would be the type of event itself may dictate the resources that are associated with it. So that could be road races, marathons, 5Ks, things like that. It could be festivals or large gatherings. Or it could be parades that we've seen in town, such as the Memorial Day Parade, the Festival of Lights, Christmas Parade, or the Fireman's Parade. When we talk about the resources associated with these types of events, I just want to put it in a little bit of context that I think historically we looked at that from a traffic control point of view only, and that is definitely a large portion of it. We talk about traffic control from a safety perspective, but we've also seen the need to assign resources to large gatherings from a intentional actor point of view. You look at what happened in Wisconsin at their Christmas parade, where somebody intentionally drove into the crowd to inflict damage. When we've seen other gatherings of people that have been targeted by violence, those are things that we now assign resources to those events to have an armed officer present in case there are those kinds of bad actors or intentional acts of violence that are committed. So this isn't just a conversation about road closure and controlling access to events. It's also about having resources on site that can intervene should there be some sort of intentional act of violence that's being committed with the gathering. So there's typically 2 ways that people target those kinds of events. One is either by creating events that draw in the victims that they're going to target, which we obviously saw on Christmas Eve in town, or there's people who have known pre-planned events that they use as their planning event for their targeted violence. So if that makes sense on the differentiation and some of the contents we're applying the conversation to. I bring back the list of events that we've typically had in town. This is based off the special police conversation we had for the events that they've assisted with. So the conversation here is associated with both traffic control and potentially with other resources being assigned from a safety perspective, which we've done for some of these events in the past. So the basic conversation here that we've added to is the type of agency requesting it. The list, so you have the event name, then you have the agency requesting it. The detail information, and what I did is I went through and I projected the police department resources that would be potentially required to staff those events from a safety perspective. So there's an individual event cost based on an officer overtime rate, and then there's a total at the bottom that estimates an annual cost for law enforcement resources to staff those events annually. So it really opens up the conversation to should there be some sort of differentiation on which types of organizations or which types of events we charge for the cost of the resources that are assigned to protect those events so that they can happen smoothly. And so I open the floor to any questions or comments you may have regarding that.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, Chief, the page of the special event permit application, you know, I've seen this page before and it never resonated to me that in the bottom right, the metric of the attendees as being the driving force behind increased fees. The way you explained it using the marathon that covers 26 miles but has 10 runners, still needs a lot of resources versus, you know, whatever. The nice thing about that metric is it's a pretty easy one, it's pretty tangible, right? As you move into this discussion and you know, what to charge up front or, you know, differentiating the different activities, it becomes interesting.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why I didn't go through and try to project based on the type of organization is I wanted to have the conversation first on seeing what the board's intention would be before that kind of number was put together, because it would require going to some of these organizations and trying to determine whether they are for-profit or not-for-profit, or there's a differentiation between types of local government, whether it's a school district. There's some conversation with the fire department on the surface. It seems like a local government, but some of those events may be associated with the association, not the actual district itself. So I think there's still some nuances to some of those conversations that probably should be discussed at this level before we reach out to organizations.
Well, the other thing that the chart that you show, the activity chart, you've given a lot of thought, put a lot of time into trying to determine exactly what resources you would need for that event, which has nothing really to do with the number of attendees, as you stated earlier. So I don't think we can look at that flat fee of what it would be to hold that event. It certainly is going to be something that you would evaluate and know what resources are needed for that organization to hold the event. I think one of the things we do need to decide as a board is, are there organizations that we will not charge, and how do we make that decision?
Yeah, I think that would be a difficult decision. To use Tom's phrase earlier, is this fair?
Well, the other thing,
That's what I question,
You know,
is
the
the
other
fairness. If we're gonna implement something, in my opinion, it should be across the board.
and I would add that I do serve on a board. I've served on that board for a very long time, of a not-for-profit, and we have a large event. Actually, it's coming up next Saturday, and it's the Pink Ribbon Run and Walk at Genesee Valley Park. And we do pay for the resources
Right.
that are required for us to hold that event.
And some of that, I think, go ahead there.
So as part of this permit application, using this metrics, would your fee be listed on this permit application? So you would have to determine based upon the event itself as to what that charge would be, correct?
Yeah, so if I go back to the current applications, so those at home can see it.
Right.
There's a process here, let me give you a second. So on the back page of this permit process, the permit has to get approved. So it goes through these different departments currently to be assessed for any concerns we may have with the event or the proposed event that's scheduled. I think the logical way that this may go is that the person submits the application as we currently do. And as part of the approval process, we assess the resources that we require, and then we provide them with the cost of those resources so that they can make the decision as to whether the event is viable or not for them to continue the process.
Yeah, you know, it's, and it just, and John, I really agree with you on that. But we're talking about, just so we're on the same page, events that are for outside town government. Like, are we on the same, like, when we have summer celebration, that's a, we're not charging the rec center for. Thank you, Jen. Then we are on the same page. And then, because another thing that gets kind of, I think, I don't know, I think there's a lot of ambiguity and misunderstanding by people when you say a non-for-profit. Patty, like you just said, a non-for-profit, you know, they have expenses. You have money that comes in, you have expenses that go out. And a lot of times, a not-for-profit ends up with a, you know, Paul, I'll hand it off to you, less expenses than revenue, so they have a surplus at the end of the year, and, you know, whatever. So, I just sometimes, and I've seen this before on other boards I've been on, like the one you're on, Patty, that some people think a non-for-profit, by definition, we're not-for-profit, so you shouldn't charge us.
How it works,
How
unfortunately.
it works, so, anyway, I digress. Jim?
I think, you know, people are paying for the safety, so they're willing to pay the price, you know, so that they could have a nice, fun event without worrying about anything. So I don't think, you know, that's a question.
Well, the shock of it is going to be that they never paid this. Some of these events were covered by the special police, which that's not what's happening now. Although, I believe that the school district, do we charge the school district when we cover some of the football games at their request?
Yeah, so some of this isn't foreign to us. We have a past practice with different types of events that happen that aren't necessarily associated with the fee application or the public event application. Currently, the school district, if they request law enforcement presence at certain events, there's a chargeback process for that, and we have that configured. When contractors are doing traffic control and they would like a police officer to direct traffic, we have a chargeback process for that. If we've done this seasonally at Wegmans for traffic control, we charge them back. So we've had this process in place for specific instances, but we've never had it as part of a structured event. And like you mentioned, a lot of that was because we had special police to do the traffic control, which was the primary concern. Some of these events, though, we still put officers. Like, for example, a turkey trot, there's a large concentration of people in a confined space. We put an officer down there as a armed presence just to make sure that there's no bad actors or intentional acts of violence. We've done that at other public events where we know there's going to be gatherings, jazz fest, summer celebration, things like that. So the public safety approach has been the same, but we haven't been consistent with the approach of how we permit the process. So there's definitely the format there that you're referring to.
Okay. And Chief, and I'm glad, John, that you said that in the past we had the special police do some, not all of what you'd be doing. And, you know, without dragging that history back up, even as recently as March 24th at our town board workshop, Chief, you came in here and showed this is where we're at in the process of trying to figure out a new organizational structure that replaces the special police. And 2 out of the 3 options are paid. So where you have that same chart that you have up there as a point of reference for how much it would cost police overtime, you could bring up the chart from March 24th to show what that would cost us if we go with the option of a paid, the successor organization to the special police, either paid as peace officers or paid as non-peace officers. So I almost look at this as that this is a mutually exclusive, agnostic approach. Whether the resources we're going to deploy in the future, if we go to this, is our Webster Police Department, or it's an organization that we're still trying to vet. If it's a paid organization, we either got to increase the budget by that much money that used to be a free resource by the volunteer special police, with no recouping of that increased budget expense. Or we look at this and say, well, here's a revenue stream, fair revenue stream, and I think, as Chief showed, one that really the town of Webster is kind of the last of the municipalities not charging. There's a feeling potentially out there, and my wife runs a lot of events, and the turkey trot's awesome, right? The turkey trot is fantastic. Yellow Jacket Racing, non-for-profit or not, I don't know. That's a big revenue producer. So how will they have a culture shock or a sticker shock if we do this and all of a sudden the organizers of that event find out that the number of miles covered and the resources, whether the police or the new organization that we're still trying to vet, if they're paid, would it be the kind of sticker shock that all of a sudden chases them away from doing that in Webster? I'd be surprised if it did. Personally.
Well, I look at the projected possible cost of that, and I can't imagine it would.
No.
Given
Right.
the expected revenue of the event itself.
Patty, I think they'd be like, we're surprised it took this long until something like this came
Well,
up.
it's exactly, the other towns have been doing this for quite a while, and while we certainly want to host all these wonderful events, we don't want to be the town that's hosting it because we're not charging, but our residents are having to pay for it through their taxes.
And that's exactly what it is. It's a workshop, so camera's not on it, there is no microphone, but thank you. Chief, board, any other comments, questions here? Thanks. All right. And last up tonight is just a follow-up, I guess I'll call it that, to 2 weeks ago. We had a workshop agenda item, we had a PowerPoint presented by Finance Director Paul Adams on a proposal of how the town possibly could utilize the slightly over $4.05 million of ARPA funds in the three categories that were proposed, and subsequent discussion and all that. And I know that, and there was a very good discussion on this. I'm going to hand the baton to you, Paul, because I'm pretty certain because of subsequent discussions, emails, this and that, you have filed, you are ahead of the April 30th. So I'll leave you with that.
There was a webinar that was held on Monday, which was extremely helpful, and it was held by the Department of Treasury. And I wish it had been held about a month ago. It would have been very helpful. Because I think everybody in the state was very confused. There were 3,700 municipalities on the call. But it clarified a lot of things. As it turns out, we were able to file the report and claim the whole amount as revenue loss and take what they call the standard allowance, which gives us complete flexibility as to how we spend it. But the way I did it, I set it up as 3 projects. One for grants, which we talked about, $350,000. That amount is flexible. $2.5 million for the wastewater treatment plant phase 2 project, and the third project, $1,200,000, $860 I think it was, for general government services, which we could certainly spend on a host of different things. We touched on some of that 2 weeks ago, but it doesn't have to be decided on tonight. We can talk about it over the next few weeks or couple months. So I think we just want to make sure everyone's in agreement with the initial proposal. That's the first step. And I also developed a grant application and an FAQ document, which we'd like to post out on the website next week. So I think you probably all had a chance to review it. If you don't have any issues with it, we can go forward with it. I know Patty brought up one issue, I think it's on page 5 of the FAQ. It actually mentions that the grant can only be used to cover expenses incurred after March 1st, 2020 that have not already been reimbursed through other programs such as CARES Act, Payment Protection Program, etc. So I guess the question is, do we really want to make it that restrictive? Or do we just, we're not really concerned if there are other reimbursements?
Yeah, and I only brought it up because it appeared to be conflicting with something farther down on the page that said then it could be.
Right.
So I was just looking for clarification on that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know that we want to restrict it based on other forms of assistance that the applicant may have received.
I would
Yeah,
say no.
We're going to look at the whole picture, so
yeah.
it's going to be a robust application.
So, Paul, if I understand this correctly, you can't make this stuff up. So on Monday, April 25th, with 5 days to, the federal government said, you have to file this.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't give the final rule until April 1st, right?
Correct, right.
And then 3,700 municipalities get on this webinar because they're all in the same position as us. We're like, how does this work? So if I understand this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when we came here on the 14th and presented to break down the 3 categories, thinking that the way we were interpreting it, that by April 30th, you at least got to lock down what's in general government services.
Yes.
So it almost makes you have to lock down the 3 categories if you decide to go to these 3 categories.
Correct.
Your clarification was that really it's more generic, that you can just do the whole 4 million for filing purposes.
Correct, yeah, as standard allowance.
As a standard allowance and without getting into all that. So has this changed? Is the commitment of the monies still December 31st, 2024?
Correct, that has not changed.
Okay. Is the expenditure of the money December 31st, 2026?
Correct, yeah, obligated by 24, spend it by the end of 26.
Okay. I'm almost done with my questions.
I feel like I'm in a position.
A nice one. So were you at least put in, based on the spirit or whatever of how the board has been talking about this, here's what we're thinking about for the 3 categories. Category 1, in no particular order, but there's a reason why I'm doing it in this order. I'll do it by the size. Sewer is $2.5 million. Sewer is a town government function.
Correct.
A town government function that whatever we do with that in expenditures has to be done by either budget, taxing our residents, getting grants, or utilizing this argument. But it's a government function, town government function. $1.2 million is category 2. That is general government services. Runs the gamut. You had the PowerPoint up here the other day. It showed IT infrastructure, the comprehensive plan. I mean, we could go on and on, right?
Sure.
But it's a government function. That's the common denominator to that. It's a town government function that all of those bullet points that come under general government services, we would either be paying for those in our budgets that we tax the residents, through grants, or in this case, this money.
Yeah.
In the third category, which right now we have slotted at $350,000, is a category that I think we're gonna probably do the most discussion on tonight, of going to agencies, entities that are outside of town government, non-for-profits or whatever, but that's based on this FAQ and all this. What they do is for the good of Webster residents.
That's right.
I could list down off the top of my head about 20 different agencies and entities like that. So I want to make sure I understand something, is that because the numbers, at least in spirit, are 2.5, 1.2, and 350, if all of a sudden the board agrees to this time schedule of when entities, we open the portal for them to apply, when they have to have their application in by, and when the town is going to decide, July 8th, on who gets awarded. Am I right in assuming that you're saying that if we decide based on the applications we get and what situations these entities have had and we've discerned, could we award an aggregate of 400,000?
Yes.
Does everybody understand that?
It's flexible.
It's flexible.
Or 500,000.
Or 500.
Geez, thanks, John.
I just had to throw it.
Or, if you want me to be the Dutch uncle,
No.
we might see that nobody's really qualified for this based on mean, whatever, and we only give out 200,000.
Yeah, might do 200.
And if it's less than 350 or it's more than 350, this is simple math, then the 2.5 million for the sewer, the 1.2 million for general services is dollar for dollar effect.
Right.
Okay,
And this will become clearer once we get through the grant process.
okay. So it looks as though, you know, and I appreciate that you got out the FAQ. Right now, if the town board has looked at this, and I appreciate that maybe they haven't, because this thing, just like Paul said, this is coming fast and furious. I hate to say typical government, but April 1st was the final ruling. We talked about that on April 14th, you know, or whatever. And April 25th is when you went to a webinar that kind of gave you guidance on how to do this, which all's well that ends well. I like the way it's structured. How does the board feel about these proposed timeframes and the FAQs and going forward with monies in a category that is outside of government services? At least on paper right now, earmarked as $350,000.
I just want to be sure that, because there was some robust discussion at our last meeting on what those numbers and how that should be appropriated, I just want to be sure that we do have board consensus on an approximation of the numbers as you just stated them. I know that it was something that was proposed last time, and there was, as I said, robust discussion on why it should be something different. And we've all had some time to think about it, and now we're learning that there could still be some leeway, but I think it's only right that we do have consensus on those numbers moving forward. As I said, an approximation.
I would agree with the approximation with the understanding that it is flexible, and we can take another look at it based upon the amount of applicants that we receive. I'd like that flexibility there.
I agree.
And I guess the other question I would have is, as to the process itself in making decisions as to who's awarded these monies and how much, what is, that process hasn't really been defined.
Yeah. Because
Because
you are absolutely
we're
correct.
going to stick to a timeline. I'd like to see that timeline sped up, obviously, as I stated before. A lot of these 501c3s could utilize these funds sooner than later. And I think the sooner that we define the decision-making process, and Paul, you did a fantastic job with this application, very comprehensive, fantastic job. I just don't want to see these applications come in and then they sit for a while. So I'd like to set up some sort of, to understand what the structure will be of making these decisions.
I think the biggest things we have to decide is there's going to be a subcommittee. But as far as the timeline is concerned, I think the timeline is spot on. I agree with you that these organizations have needed this additional funding for a while. But for those who haven't realized that there could be this grant process, they need time to pull all this information together. And honestly, I don't think it's a lot of time that we are giving them.
I agree.
So I think that the timeline is pretty fair to everybody.
And how, the other question I had is how are we as a town board going to communicate to these agencies that are applicable to
Yeah,
fill these out? I mean, that's very important, because the last thing I would want to see is, you know, someone or a business or an agency that could have submitted an application, for some reason didn't get the word,
Yeah.
and then we close out the grant
Right.
for application process. So that's
No doubt.
very important.
Big time, and you know, it's funny, John, because where I agree with Patty that the timeline, I think, is spot on for a lot of reasons, and just, there's only 3 tangible dates here.
Right.
May 2nd is when the portal opens up, now that's Monday. It's Thursday.
Yeah.
So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. That leads to your question, like, I would, you know, I'm a big communication person, how do we get communication out to all the potential 501c3s, nonprofits, agencies that are non-town of Webster government, so that they're aware that between May 2nd and May 31st, they can apply for that? It's a great question. I have some ideas on it. You know, I could write my article for the May 4th Supervisor's Corner that goes on our website and all that. Karen, who's behind the door, I'm sure she's salivating with ideas on how to blast it out on Facebook and all that. Kim Doyle and myself, who deal with all these different agencies, and I really don't want to name names right now.
Right.
But in the last 28 months since I've been supervisor, I've gone to a lot of board meetings of non-for-profits and agencies in Webster that service Webster. You know, so I think we will be able to have a robust way to get the word out there. Because I agree with you, Jen, the last thing I would ever like to hear and see is that someone walks up to us on June 3rd and says, we're an agency that helps a lot of Webster citizens, and we didn't know about this, and now the portal's been closed. Now, once May 31st comes, now we've got until July 7th to vet those applications. I don't know if 1 will come in or if 50 will come in. Now, I have some ideas on a subcommittee to vet them, but I'm not going to get into that right now. The beauty is that because this is kind of a fluid thing, we're having to change all that, I would think in the next week or two, we need to, as a board or whatever, come up with what that process is going to be. Who is going to be that subcommittee? How then are they going to come to the board so that the decisions can be made by July 7th? Right? I don't think that has to be decided tonight.
So you're saying that your vision is that we'll have a subcommittee. Subcommittee will review the applications, discuss amongst themselves the merit, make a decision as to how much money they should be awarded out of that $350,000, or if it's going to be more than $350,000 based upon their review of the applications. They will then bring that to the board for a full vote, correct? So you're not going to have 2 board members making the decision for all these.
No.
No, I think
No,
the
absolutely not.
The subcommittee should be an advisory subcommittee.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
That's just what I would think.
It's an advisory subcommittee, and here's the thing, and this is the beauty or the downside of open meetings. You think we can come in here at an open meeting and start to have discussions about an entity's financials and all that stuff?
Of course not.
So that's why I would love to, I want to set up almost, Paul, like, here's some tangible metrics. Let's take some of the subjectivity out of it, because everybody's got an opinion. Like,
Well-
if somebody is like, you're on boards, right, Patty? So by definition, you're biased to that vocation, whatever that board does. And that's good. But we're in the seat of government. We have to get beyond that and make sure that we're awarding this based on merit and need, not on just pure emotion.
So,
And so if we can set up metrics to minimize the subjectivity and emotion, I think that would be a very wise decision that helps guide this subcommittee, advisory committee, who then they can come to the board. First of all, the board is gonna have to get a report by June 1st of, well, here's how many applications we got, here's the aggregate of what they asked for. They start their work, and as we move toward July 7th, yeah, I would like to think it would be the 5-person on the board deciding which of these entities that apply get it, and how much each get.
and to keep the spirit of objectivity in this process, as you are putting together metrics, I would suggest that that metrics is in place before the applications come in, or the applications are reviewed.
Yeah, I mean, by June 1st, they better be in place.
Okay.
They just don't need to be in place tonight.
I understand that now.
Yeah,
I'm
but
just-
if
I'm just-
I don't want us to be sitting here on July
Just
6th like,
some
oh,
concerns
shoot,
out there.
let's get the advisory committee together, it's July 6th. We need to now fast track this because we said we're gonna award by the 7th. That's not how this process should work.
Okay.
We should be moving along right on June 1st, 2nd, 3rd, whatever,
Yeah.
with trying to get ahead of this.
Right, everything will be in place.
Yep. All right. Bill?
I'm fine with that. My biggest question was, why can't we give some of this money to our taxpayers?
I would say that general services, 1.2 million, the sewer, whatever, because it's all flexible. Let me put it this way, Bill, I'm glad you asked that, because you know what's gonna happen, by the way, and Paul? Are we 2 weeks away from 2023 budget season starting?
I kind of started this morning.
We did. So here's what's gonna be interesting about the 2023 budget season. For those people that come to town board meetings or watch them on TV or whatever, they might remember that Paul Adams, our finance director, proposed to the board a couple years ago, after going to the Association of Towns, the annual meeting, we don't have a formalized fund policy. We don't have some tangible thing of, do we keep $1 in the bank, or do we keep $1 billion in the bank? In layman terms, if we have $1 billion in the bank at the town level, we are overtaxing the citizens of this town. Why would we have taxed them that much money if we haven't expended the money on services and now have this huge war chest? Do we all agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
But the town never had any tangible parameters to that, which leads to subjective decisions and emotional decisions, especially as the town board changes over time, right? Very good proposal, Paul, that led to this town board approving a fund balance policy. Now, when it was approved, we had already done the 2021 budget. When we did the 2022 budget last year, where our numbers fell on all these funds was right in between the minimum and the max, I think, right?
For the most part.
Right. That might not be the case as we move forward into this year. So, will the fund balance policy that we adopted 2 years ago affect how we handle the 2023 budget? It very well could. Because Bill, as you know, I won't even be coy about it, we've blown the doors off of sales tax. The revenue we brought in from sales tax the last couple of years has been so much more for every town. Everybody thought we were gonna get crushed in COVID. Nobody's gonna buy anything. Holy cow, I guess one thing about staying at home is that they love Amazon.
And mortgage tax.
Thank you. I left the mortgage business too early because I should have been in on that, but that's another story. Now, the question is, did everybody see on the news? Our county executive announced that we're only gonna do gas tax on $2. Not up to, if it's anything above $2 a gallon, we're not gonna have that tax. Is that good news? It's good news, right? You pay less at the pump. Is that sales tax?
I believe a piece of that is sales tax.
Piece of that is sales tax, Paul. So you got a moving target here, and we're gonna have to assess that, Bill, as a board, when we're in the middle of this budget. To make more complexity, and as you know, I've said to you many times, Bill, the budget process is 12 months. So we're gonna have to look at that fund balance policy and where we're at, right? And we're also gonna have to look at the question you just asked. Well, do we use the $4 million less the grants that we give out to non-government entities if we decide to award any or whatever non-government entities? And do we say, well, we got ultimate flexibility. You can move that 2.5 for sewer and 1.2 for general services and move and match and whatever. Paul, could you use it to plug into the 2023 budget or 2024 budget? You gotta commit the money by the end of 2024, Bill, and you gotta spend it by the end of 2026. So, I guess you could say, the heck with all this creativity of sewer and general services and all that. Let's just take the $4 million and spread it over the 23, 24, 25, and 26 budgets, because you gotta spend it by 26, and put $1 million toward each year. Could?
Can you, given some of the restrictions in that
That was my question.
document? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, we basically are giving it back to the taxpayers because it's covering things that we
Right.
need and we
Right.
would have purchased anyway.
But,
And you have to show that it's being spent for something.
yes.
So you can't just take it and appropriate to reduce.
That was my question.
Yeah, and we can't
No, you can't.
write a rebate check to all our residents and
No.
spend it for,
No, you can't do
so, yeah.
So is it kind of a 6 of this, half a dozen of another?
It is. It is working to reduce the property tax bill.
And the interesting thing about that, and Bill, I know that was your question, is that in a lot of ways, I mean, and I've talked to some other towns, I don't, if you want to ingratiate yourself politically, boy, that looks really good, doesn't it? But is it in the best interest of the taxpayers today and in the future? I don't know. But these are the decisions we will be making as we move into May, June, July, August, September on the budget. It's going to be a fun year, isn't it, Bill? I'm looking forward to it. I like budget. So, is that it for that tonight?
Can I regress to,
Regress, huh?
I have a question for the chief regarding this special event permit application. As liaison to Webster EMS, my question is, I know that, when these special events come up, sometimes they get very little notice whatsoever. What are your thoughts about somehow communicating to Webster EMS as part of this application process? So that at least they're aware, so that, they can plan from a staging standpoint for these events.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with it. I think communication amongst public safety entities is essential, especially if you have a large gathering. As far as the formal process goes, I'd have to meet with the other stakeholders. The fire marshal is the one that actually coordinates the application process, but
Okay.
me personally, I don't see an issue with that.
All right. Thank you very much.
All righty, well, that concludes the town board workshop tonight, but Charlie, I would like to make a motion to go into executive session.
That's pursuant to section 105, subdivision 1, subdivision, so let's see, subdivision F of the public officers law. This is in regard to the appointment of the
And I would like to invite into that, in that motion, the town board, the town attorney, and police chief Dennis Kohlmeyer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Aye.